Will the 1% cause the downfall of America? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me on set, Terry Jones, Associate Editor of Investors Business Daily, and Doug Altner, Analyst and Instructor at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. All right, gentlemen. Chrystia Freeland, writing in the New York Times this week, compared the 1% of America to the elites of the 14th century, Venice, the height of Venice's power, warns that the growing gap between rich and poor will lead to a downfall of the economy. She's drawing a larger picture here. It's excerpted from a book, I believe, where she tracks the downfall of various empires and linking that downfall to income disparity. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, there's it just seems to be there's no end to the bad journalism that appears in the New York Times. This article was so wrong-headed from the very beginning that it's hard to even go through it without going line by line. But let me just start here. This notion that somehow the wealthy of a 600-year-old city-state are identical to the U.S. is preposterous on the surface of it. Yeah, they did do something called La Serrata. They closed off access to the nobility. They published this Libro d'Oro, the Book of Gold, and if your name wasn't in it, you were not going to be in the top of straight of society. Well, there is no such Book of Gold in the U.S. The Book of Gold in the U.S. is get an education, get some training, rearrange your attitude so that you're a very positive person and able to be of use to an employer, and you'll get ahead in life. And that book isn't closed now, and it won't be closed.
Doug, it strikes me that there's sort of the classic correlation-causation fallacy at work here. They sort of say, like, okay, at the fall of Rome, the fall of Venice, the fall of this, the fall of that, you have a greater income disparity than there was at some healthier time in those. But that doesn't mean that that was a direct linkage. Don't you think that that's part of this argument, is that what's the linkage here? Yeah, and in and of itself, then we have to take the argument itself. Is income disparity something that needs to be addressed? But let's take a correlation causation.
Yeah, and they're not even trying to find a linkage, which I think is telling of the real motivations of these people. They're just kind of looking at outcomes, not questioning it and asking, is there a problem? But should there be a problem with income inequality? Well, just take, not everyone is a Steve Jobs. If you look at people, they have very different work ethics. People, and just across the whole population of America, people make very different decisions in terms of tough calls. Some people are much better at making calculated risks than others, and some people are much better at generating results, producing things that people want to buy than others. And so in a completely fair system, in a completely free system, we would expect there to be very different outcomes. We would expect there to be.
But could the argument be made, though, that the system is inherently unfair through a number of reasons? We would argue that government interference has, in fact, made it more unfair. But the idea is that class mobility has shut down in America, that there is a sort of stasis. That's, I think, what she's alluding to. There's a de facto gold book that shuts people down, even if there isn't actually a book. What would you say to that in terms of class mobility, that this top quintile, or whatever you want to call it, top 1%, that they are aggregating more and more and more, and by doing so are shutting down class mobility?
Yeah, the best data that exists on this have been done by been produced by the liberal Urban Institute, and they've looked at class mobility, and they look at it periodically. And what they find is that at the start of one decade and the end of the other, it's very rare that you have more than half of any quintile of income being in the same quintile. Most people who are in the bottom quintile move up, and virtually a huge share of the people in the top quintile, the top earners, are down in the middle. So there is tremendous income mobility in this country. Whether there's class mobility, that's a Marxist argument, and I wouldn't even dare engage it. But
well, I guess I'm using the word imprecisely. I really do mean income mobility, and what people want to do with it in terms of their class or how they establish that is on their own. Doug, in terms of the idea in and of itself, income inequality. Is there something unjust about it? If there were can you do a metric where you say, like, look, a more healthy society has a bigger middle class? You hear Obama say this all the time. America is built from the middle out, or whatever it is he's saying.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything at all inherently wrong with income inequality, because if a system was completely free, you would have people who are enormously more productive than others. They would be making lots of money, and therefore, there's nothing wrong with, say, if you create a large company like Apple and everyone wants to give you money because everyone wants to buy your products, and you become a billionaire because of that. That's fair. And what a lot of these people really want to do, though, is they're trying to mask their hatred of, I think, success, their hatred of the really productive people in ambiguous terms. Because say you are legitimately worried about some kind of corruption, and I think there is. Like, there are problems with Jeff Immelt calling up Washington to get a bailout.
There's a lot of cronyism at work.
Yeah.
Right? The question is that cronyism any worse or better than the cronyism of a government-run system where they try to make everyone equal in their income?
Yeah, but say you are worried about that, you wouldn't speak in terms of like, well, the problem is in the 1%. No, the problem is with the people who are in bed with government and get handouts because of that at the expense of other people. You wouldn't just demonize the people with the largest incomes, because in many ways you're demonizing the most successful people in the country. And I think that speaks to their real motivation.
In the debate this week, there was an interesting moment. Mitt Romney made this interesting comment about how he differs from George W. Bush. Let's take a look.
Our party has been focused on big business too long. I came through small business. I understand how hard it is to start a small business. That's why everything I'll do is designed to help small businesses grow and add jobs.
All right, Terry, your thoughts on his comment there, that, whether he's right or wrong or sincere or insincere about that difference, but the idea that he's going to emphasize small business, particularly with a tax rate cut, because a lot of small business are people who that income is filed on their personal return. That's where he's hitting that with his tax.
Well, I mean, I think it would be appropriate to equalize the treatment of small businesses and large businesses, and because large businesses tend to have more political clout, that's very difficult to do. But that said, I think in general, it's bad to have policies that sort of prescribe outcomes. I want X to happen because I think X is good. Well, maybe the market doesn't think X is good, and maybe the market thinks Y is better. And if so, you're going to have losses as a result of choosing X over Y. I think that could be a bad outcome if you started doing things just for small business and not for medium-sized business or large business.
Yeah, Doug, this goes to the point that you can close with, is that both candidates seem to be discussing, here's what government should be doing. Here's how government should be helping. Instead of helping big business, we should help small business. And Obama says instead of helping business, we should help the people who have not been given a fair shot in the American dream. But no one seems to bring up the idea that the government shouldn't be involved in any of this and should be primarily involved with setting up a system whereby individual rights lead people to their own natural conclusions. What would you have to say about?
Yeah, there's so many issues here, but it's where to start? So just take like the whole, we want to help small business and not big business. I think the government should first get out of the way more than anything else, so that way the productive people are free to be productive and produce things that people want to buy. But like, why is small business okay and big business is not okay? If small business is good, you'd think big business would be even better because they're producing even more things. Like, it's just, you're taking small business to its successful conclusion.
I mean, if he had said, I want to take the cronyism that develops when a company gets really successful and gets the political clout that you're talking about, Terry, and I want to remove that clout, I don't want to equalize the playing field so all businesses are playing on the same field, I would have been like, go. But there always seems to be this picking of a winner.
Yeah, and that's what we really need to do. We need to have this more pro-market attitude. And I think a lot of people don't really know what that would mean, but that would mean a completely voluntary society where all economic transactions are permitted. If you want to open up a Walmart in LA, people cannot lobby the government to stop you. If you feel that, if you're representing a union and you feel Caterpillar's not paying you high enough wages, you can't get the government to come in on your side. And you can't get a bailout if your company fails.
That a lot of people I talk to go like, well, we can't go back to having just an unfettered free market like we did during the housing crisis. And you're like, we haven't had an unfettered free market in 100 years in this country. And the idea that government has been highly intrusive in trying to do these egalitarian things, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. It didn't work with Roosevelt. It didn't work with Johnson. It hasn't worked with Carter. It hasn't worked with Obama or Clinton or even Bush with his compassionate conservatism. It doesn't work. And they keep on seeming to want to come up with, oh, now we have the thing that's going to work. Back to my comment on intentions, good intentions and hell, and that relationship. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. For Terry and Doug, I'm Allen Barton, and you've been watching Front Page.